While Nintendo hasn't always been amazing when it comes to new consoles, they've also knocked it out of the park countless times. There's so many legendary Nintendo consoles, and the Switch is the most recent example. It launched in March of 2017, had a hectic and rushed development cycle that kicked off after the Wii U, which launched in late 2012, was pretty much a flop. Nintendo needed a new system out on the market fast. The Switch absolutely saved them. I mean, it had an innovative design, promising lineup of games, and of course, Breath of the Wild. That was your launch title. But every titan eventually falls, and it's all but confirmed at this point that Nintendo is very close to revealing their follow-up system, which we are going to call the Switch 2 in this video, even though it might end up having a completely new name. But there is a ton of evidence suggesting the Switch 2 is near, very near. And today, we're going to go over the recent leaks and intel drops on the system, and by the end of this, you'll hopefully be as hyped for this thing as I am while I'm making this video. You let me know in the comments if you're going to get the Switch 2, drop a like on this video, and despite the insane success of the Switch, not to mention the giant installed user base, it became pretty clear the console is approaching its final days. Even though games are still coming out for it, a lot of multi-platform games have been skipping the system due to the hardware limitations, and the big multi-platform games that do get a Switch port often have abysmal performance and seriously downgraded graphics. I mean, how many of you actually saw Mortal Kombat 1 on the Switch with your own eyes? If you think Switch ports are bad now, they're only going to get worse from here on out. While Nintendo has never been known for having super crazy hardware in their consoles, they are fully aware of the fact it needs a refresh. Now, in addition to the decreasing performance of the Switch games, Nintendo has also been very quiet about their upcoming first-party projects, which that's kind of out of character. We know about a few smaller projects, Princess Peach Showtime, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, as well as re-releases of Luigi's Mansion 2 and Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, but when it comes to the big ones, the mainline Mario and Zelda games, Nintendo's been quiet, almost as if they've been saving the next big Mario and Zelda games for the next generation of hardware. There's also been a shocking lack of updates on Metroid Prime 4, which was announced all the way back in 2017. That's almost 8 years ago, but it doesn't have a release date. Now, this has led many to believe that the development on Metroid Prime 4 was actually moved to the Switch 2 a while back, but obviously Nintendo isn't going to confirm that until the Switch 2 is actually announced. Now, it's been looking more and more like the Switch 1's time has come to an end, but Nintendo is dragging their feet when it comes to confirming a new console, and honestly, I do understand their hesitancy. When you've sold over 130 million consoles, it's kind of hard to justify leaving it behind and starting over, but Nintendo knows the time is upon them, and that's why we've been hearing a ton of insider information and leaked intel about the Switch 2. One of the most recent leaks it made the rounds, it came out, and it's one that you may have heard on Twitter, is that the Switch 2's hardware is going to be roughly equivalent to the PlayStation 4. Now, the base PS4 wasn't the most powerful console in the world, but it got the job done, and it was generally pretty consistent with its 1080p resolution at 30 frames per second. So, while that probably isn't the kind of benchmark you want to hear in 2024, we do have to remember, this is for another Switch-style handheld home console hybrid. Now, the PS4 may not have been a technical powerhouse, but it was a lot stronger than the Switch, what it had to offer. So it's still going to be a pretty huge step up from before, especially if Nintendo launches it for, say, $300 to $400. Now, being able to have a console with the PS4 level performance in the palm of your hand at all times, that's good. And such a hefty jump in hardware, a lot of existing Switch games would likely get a performance boost, which could do amazing things to games like Tears of the Kingdom and Smash Ultimate, which already run really good on the Switch, relative to other Switch games at least. So personally, I like that news. I'm happy with the Switch 2 at least being at the PS4's level. Now, there's a bit of debate over just how backwards compatible the Switch 2 is going to be, and again, we don't know if it's going to be called the Switch 2, but that's how we refer to it until we get a name. Nintendo has a massive catalog of great Switch games that I'm sure they don't want to leave behind, but it's unclear just how well the Switch 2 is going to be able to work with the Switch 1 cartridges. I mean, it's safe to assume that all digital games are going to be backwards compatible on the new console when it comes out, but the physical ones depends on whether or not Nintendo decides to change the way they're doing hardware this generation. If Nintendo decides to make the Switch 2 use a different kind of cartridge than the one, they'll have to change the cartridge slot on the console, and if they do that, they'd have to give the Switch 2 a second cartridge slot for the sake of backwards compatibility. That may end up being a hefty increase in production costs that they honestly don't deem worth it. In the past, Nintendo has done their best to maintain backwards compatibility where possible. The Wii U was totally backwards compatible with the original Wii, and the original Wii was totally backwards compatible with the GameCube. Even in the realm of handhelds, Nintendo has done their best with preserving their older hardware generations. The Nintendo DS launched with 2 different cartridge slots, one for the DS and one for the GameCube games, and it made it a lot easier for people to ditch the Game Boy and pick up a DS, which is a major reason why that console was so successful right out of the gate. It was smart. Now the Switch 2, it's complicated. The gaming industry has largely transitioned to digital games instead of physical, but Nintendo's fan base is a very dedicated one to buying cartridges. So, while PlayStation and Xbox are perfectly happy moving forward with digital-only consoles, I don't know if the same can be said about Nintendo. The Switch 2 might eventually get a digital-only variant a few years after the base version, but I wouldn't expect it to be there on day one. Honestly, it could go either way, or whether or not Nintendo is going to make sure the physical Switch 1 games can be played on the Switch 2. On one hand, it would be awesome if the Switch 2 was totally backwards compatible with the 1. You wouldn't have to rebuy all your Switch 1 games, and it would be a lot easier to transition from one console to the next. On the other side, just think of how much money Nintendo could make if they didn't have backwards compatibility on the Switch 2 and instead did a bunch of enhanced re-releases of all the noteworthy Switch 1 games. Knowing how much Nintendo loves re-releasing their first-party games, it wouldn't shock me at all, not in the slightest, if the Switch 2 skipped backwards compatibility for the sake of all the potential re-releases of Switch 1 games, but hopefully cooler heads will prevail, and the Switch 2 will just be backwards compatible, because that is what's ultimately best for the consumer, and it's what's best for game preservation. Now, as for when we're going to see the Switch 2, I'm 100% convinced that Nintendo is going to announce it this summer, during their Nintendo Direct presentation. New consoles are traditionally revealed either the summer before they launch, or the summer prior to. With how many leaks that have been going around about the Switch 2, I'm 100% expecting Nintendo to announce the system during their summer Nintendo Direct presentation. But as for the release date, I'm divided, I'm split. On one hand, some insiders have suggested that the Switch 2 is actually going to come out this holiday season. But on the other hand, Nintendo generally lets their console announcements sit for a little while. They cook, they simmer for at least a year before launching them, which would mean a reveal this summer would put it in 2025. Here's a friendly reminder. The first Switch launched in early 2017, roughly 3.5 years after the PS4 and the Xbox One. So it's not like Nintendo is going to try and directly compete with other consoles. With all that being said, it's also believed that the PS5 Pro and potentially some kind of Xbox mid-generation refresh will be released in late 2024. So Nintendo may just want to avoid the competition again and wait until early 2025 to drop their system. Yes, they'd miss out on the holiday sales if they did that, but it's not like that caused any issues for the first Switch. And besides, if the Switch launches early 2025, it's going to sell like crazy during the 2025 holiday season. So personally, I'm expecting a reveal this summer and a launch in 2025. I'm interested to hear what you guys think in the comments. I hope you have a fantastic day. And also, what do you think will be the launch title for the new Nintendo? Do you think it will be Metroid Prime 4? Do you think it will be a Zelda and Mario game? Or do you think it'll be a combination of both? It's kind of hard not to launch with one of your flagship IPs like Zelda or Mario. But then again, Metroid Prime 4, we've been waiting forever for. So people would be really excited about that one too. Give me your best guess.